Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Ryan McGee. Ryan, a lot to get to with you as we are approaching week 5 here. I want to start with your E60 doc that debuts on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Probably by the time people are listening to this, The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin. I had a chance to watch it last week, and the best endorsement I can give you is that I had planned on watching 10 minutes of it and then coming back to it later in the evening, like after, wife has gone to bed, and I'm just going to watch the
Yeah.
50, like the final 50 minutes. And I was going to get a workout in. And then once I put it on, I couldn't turn it off, and I just watched the entire thing. It's excellent. I mean, Lane does not do stuff like this. Can you explain just kind of how all of this came together?
Well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to get it out there. We've been working on this thing since, back in early spring. So of this year. And honestly, in the pitch, we started pitching this to Lane a year ago. And you'll appreciate this. Part of my pitch initially was, hey, we can do the stock. And, they're in the middle of the season, and let me get through it. And then, the Netflix series dropped, which has been great. But he's not in that. He chose not to participate. And so part of my pitch to him was, I can give you a whole hour to yourself. and that helped if you know Lane. But it's no, I'm excited for people to see it. I'm very thankful for his willingness to sit down and, this, in different places, podcasts, interviews, whatever, he's addressed the Raiders over here, and he's addressed Tennessee over there, and he's addressed, Saban over here. To my knowledge, he's never done it all at once until now. And we go, it's the title of the film, right? The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin. We go station by station, all the way back to, starting at Fresno State. And even earlier than that, his father, Monty Kiffin, of course, inventor of the Tampa 2 defense, legend. He's a huge part, as you know, of the documentary and his relationship with his dad. And I adored his dad. I loved his dad. His dad, so I never told you this story, but Monty's only head coaching job was at North Carolina State in the early 80s, 3 years. And that was right when my father was starting out as an ACC football official. We lived in Raleigh, which meant Dad couldn't officiate NC State games per the rules, but he worked all the scrimmages and all the practices because, Coach Kiffin wanted to know the rules, and the refs needed the reps. So my dad would take my brother and myself to all these practices, and we would play pickup football with the kids of the coaches, and Lane was there, and he's 6 years old. And I remembered him because obviously he's the head coach's son, but also he was the only one out there calling DPIs and holding and all that stuff. We're playing pickup football. And so fast forward 20 years of my brother calling and going, I think that mouthy kid from State just got the Raiders job. And so I've been around Lane in some way, shape, or form since we were kids. He denies that story, by the way. His dad backed me up. When they were at FAU, his dad was like, no. I remember having to blow the whistle and stop practice and tell Lane to quit blowing up my practice. So the gift of, this better than anyone, someone sitting down and just sharing everything. And you can kind of sense it when an interview is going in a direction that's even further than you thought it was going to go. I'm very thankful for his time, and hopefully we did that justice with the 1 hour on ESPN.
Ryan, what was the biggest revelation for you while doing this process that took a while to put together? And this is obviously not just something that comes together. You talk about like how long and how much you have to make a pitch and whatnot. But what was the thing that going through all this, all the interviews, everything related to Lane that you came away from going, I feel differently about that now compared to before this?
That I believe him. And I don't mean that as a slight, but he has changed as a human being. And, as a father, he keeps talking about the second chance of being an in-person father. And, like in the documentary, you see there's this scene of them having like family dinner. That wasn't staged. That's how that goes down, multiple nights a week. And his brother, Chris, one of his assistant coaches now, literally their backyards bump up to each other. And, his daughter is Landry's a junior at Ole Miss. His son Knox has moved to Oxford from LA to play football at Oxford High School. His ex-wife Layla has a place in Oxford now. So they're all there except for the one middle child who's playing volleyball on the West Coast. And so when he sits and talks about changing himself, and physically you can see it, obviously, right? The guy's lost 50 pounds. He's turned 50. He's doing hot yoga and playing pickleball all the time. But he also has become very like introspective, like, and he's really changed who he is as a person. Who moves to Oxford and quits drinking? No one,
It's a good
right?
point.
No one, and he has not had a drink in 5 years, and so it's just he's a new human being at the age of 50, and I don't know if I would have bought that 100%. And I'm not naive. People who watch this documentary who live in Knoxville, or who are live in Oakland, they might not come around, but at least I think they might understand that he is a work in progress, and I think that's commendable because when you turn 50, you kind of at a crossroads. It's been working out pretty well. Why don't I stick with the way I'm doing it, or can I be a better person? And so when he repeatedly kept talking about improving himself, that caught me off guard. I knew he had done some of the things that he'd done, but his dedication to it, I think I had underestimated.
Yeah, Tom Herman just turned 50 this offseason, and where's he? Like there
Yeah,
are like
yeah,
this there's just no guarantee that you get a second life in this sort of way, and it takes obviously certain perspective changing over the course of those struggles to get to this place. And
yep.
Lane looks like someone who's fortunate to get here. His cockiness, his brashness, it always, in my opinion, reflected someone who just wasn't comfortable in his own skin. And one of the things I thought was really interesting about this piece is he said he used to not care what people thought about him, and that kind of was reflected in his actions. And now he actually does care because he
Right.
realizes kind of how his actions impact other people. And it's just a totally inverse way to mature in a lot of, but everything about Lane feels like an inverse that's playing out in real time. What did you kind of make of that and how it was reflected in his career progression?
Well, I think that it's interesting too because he's very honest about when he took the Ole Miss job, he thought the same thing that all the rest of us thought, which was this is a bridge job, right? Be there a few years, have a little success, get a better offer somewhere else. But he says it we put it in the trailer. He said it repeatedly: is I needed Oxford more than Oxford needed me, and he talks about the fact that he looked down his nose. I'm paraphrasing, but looked down his nose at the pace of Oxford. It's going to be too slow for me. But what that slower pace has done is it gave him the room mentally, on his schedule, however you want to look at it, to broaden himself a little bit and to look inside himself a little bit. And I don't think you are afforded that in Austin or in Los Angeles or even in like a Knoxville. I don't think that he would have ever given himself the room unless he was in a situation where he was given the space. And some of that started at FAU. I went down there when he was at FAU, which we don't spend a lot of time on in the doc. But I went down to FAU and saw him win the Shula Bowl against FIU, and I sat in the press box with his dad, who I hadn't talked to since I was a kid, and it was even then I could see because when I talked to the Kiffins about Boca Raton and they're winning 10 games a year and winning the conference, what they talked about was every morning walking on the beach as a family and reconnecting as a family. And Chris was there, and mom and dad were there, and the kids and Layla weren't there, but they would come visit. But he talked about you know walking on the beach and holding hands with his mom. And so I think some of that started before he got to Ole Miss, but then Ole Miss was even slower, right? And really gave him the room to do this self improvement. Yeah. By the way, he wanted me to do the hot yoga with him, and I declined. I'm like, dude, number one, I have no experience with this, and number two, I ain't doing it on television. The first time I go in there, I'm definitely not going to do that with cameras rolling. But he does it every day, even when they're on the road. Like on a game day on the road, he takes a hot yoga class before they start going through breakfast and walkthrough and all those things. And it's that dedication that I'm impressed with because he and I are about the same age, and I don't spend as much time working on myself as I should, and he's way busier than I am. So how he's done that, I'm not sure.
He looks good, and I wouldn't tell that to his face again
Yeah,
because the last time I did that was at SEC Media Days in 2021 after he lost all that weight, and he like
yeah,
was tweeting about it, and he's like that's a weird thing to ask another guy of like how'd you get in shape, and I was like oh okay sorry my bad, but Lane that's like still that's just a sign of he's just still a little bit awkward.
yeah.
He's very one of one, and I've spent a lot of time in this role in this job that I've had trying to figure out why it is that we're so captivated by Lane. And I think it's in part because three high profile exits in 5 years. There's not a coach in North American sports who had a 5 year run like that with those exits and how weird they were at every level. And we are always just going to be captivated by Lane because we're always anticipating the next move with him. And maybe that's unfair to the people of Ole Miss who have now seen 6 years of this, but we're soon going to be talking about all the jobs that Lane could leave for. Could he leave for Florida and all this? Do you get a sense that the list is really, really small? Because I do. And I know he said at Tennessee, USC is the only job in America I would have left for. That fell on deaf ears, obviously, and Tennessee fans don't want to hear that. But what's the sense you get about that list and kind of if that is even a thought for Lane Kiffin at this point anymore?
Yeah, Tennessee fans, as in my wife and my in-laws and my college roommates, right? Yeah, they're very angry with me that I even did this thing to start off with. But no, but I and I've been wrong before so many times, but I was in Oxford, what, 3 or 4 times between spring and summer. And, I was last year in the 2024 season, we did Marty McGee and SEC Nation in Gainesville week 1 and 3. And week 3, we had to go to this mandatory dinner at Strickland's house, at the athletic director's house. And all those boosters were saying, we'll have him here by the end of October. Because,
Wow.
obviously Billy Napier saved his job, but now it's happening again. And his name is coming up for a lot of jobs. And you're right. I think the list is extremely short, but I don't know that there is a list. And I say that based on the experience that I've had with him. He's so happy. And I think that when he talks about Knoxville, the reason he's sad is because I think he believes that he could have had this in Knoxville. I know Layla thinks that, his ex-wife. If they'd have stayed in there, the great what if is what if they'd stayed in Knoxville because they loved it. And Layla really loved it. And this is a Florida girl, right? And she loved it there. They named her son Knox, right? I mean, they loved it there. And I think that they, to this day, think, man, what would it have been had we stuck that out? And I think that little voice is in the back of his head when it comes to Ole Miss, which is, the grass isn't always greener. Now the money might be, right? There's a lot more green over there that way, and the prestige might be, but the story's told, and you saw it about the Auburn job. He says he had not decided if he was going to take that job or had he been offered it or whatever. But there's a great story that Landry, his daughter, tells about. She had just moved to Oxford and was going to her senior year in high school, moved from Los Angeles because she wanted to go to Ole Miss and she wanted to live with her dad. Hadn't lived with him since she was little, and he starts talking about the Auburn job, and she's like, "I just got here, and now you're going to leave?" And there's a great story in the doc about she and her friends put together this super sad PowerPoint presentation and dropped it on him in his office. And so I've told every Ole Miss fan, if you never met Landry, you need to meet her and thank her because she's probably the reason that Lane Kiffin is still in Oxford. So I don't know that he's going to leave. I think he's happy. And I think that he wants to do things there that no one's ever done before. And with all the greatest respect to Archie Manning and Johnny Vaught, with the exception of a national championship, this is the greatest run of Ole Miss football, and it's not even that close. And so I think that he wants to bring rings to that building. You know this. When you go to Vaught Hemingway, it's amazing. It's one of my favorite venues in all of sports, let alone college football. But there aren't a lot of accolades on the wall, right?
No.
It's a co-division championship under David Cutcliffe, and it's a national title, an SEC title from the '60s. That's it. And so if he can get them to the next level, even just for a year, plus reconnecting with his family who have all moved to Oxford, then it's going to be a hard sell to get someone to get him to want to leave that.
There's so many what ifs, so many sliding doors. You talk about Landry and how Landry very much made it seem, and it was great that you guys had the interview with her as well. She made it seem like he was probably going to be going to
Yep.
Auburn, and you're not pulling out that sort of card unless you think he's gone. Lane made it seem like he hadn't made up his mind. And it is fascinating to look back of what it could have been had he decided at the end of the 2022 season when everybody was speculating, yeah, he's going to replace Brian Harsin at Auburn. If he had decided to go in that direction, all the things we'd be talking about with Lane right now. But there is another sliding door. And I'm curious if you considered this as well. What if that phone call with the USC booster when he was talking about the potential sanctions of the Pete Carroll era, what if that had been, we're really not sure what our sanctions are going to be. We're not sure, how this is going to play out. This is kind of feel like maybe they're going to hit the hammer. Instead, he talks to the booster, who obviously like they're never going to say, "Oh yeah, we're about to get," they're going to throw the book at us, the NCAA. And Lane, I don't know that Lane takes that job if he knows what's coming. And that's maybe the
No.
most interesting sliding door. And is Lane still the Tennessee coach if that phone call goes differently?
Yeah, no. I think it 100% he stays. But if someone had been honest with him. And and who are these USC people, right? Because you know this, we tell the tarmac story about Pat Hayden. And something I had never heard was how close Lane believed. And I think Pat Hayden was ready to say, you know what, never mind, you get to stay. But he had to go make a phone call first. So, who are these people? But I'm with you. If they had been honest with him, hey, we're probably going to get popped. I don't know that he takes that job because the job that people he doesn't get enough credit for that year at Tennessee because there's this there's this retroactive history that's told about Philip Fulmer. And the reality is the last half decade Phil Fulmer was there was a mess. And I remember going to spring practice, Lane Kiffin's only spring practice at Tennessee, and him talking to a group of reporters and us and going, I don't have a center. There's no one on this roster that can snap the ball to the quarterback. And he's on the phone to his friends at junior colleges. I need a center. I just need someone who can snap the football. And Fulmer was an offensive line guy, supposedly, right? So I don't pe- I don't he does not get enough credit for what he did in the 1 year he was there. And so yes, the what if, the sliding doors you say, is what kind of momentum did he have taking a pretty bad football team and still turning it into a winning record? It should have beaten Alabama that year and not go to USC. But yeah, if they had been honest with him and they weren't, because you talk to people who were in the building then, they knew they were going to get popped. If they thought they could talk their way out of it, they don't. And again, talking about retroactive history, I don't care that it wouldn't be illegal now. What Reggie Bush did was egregious. It was. And they knew it was coming. And something was coming. And so for them and then for him to win the games that he won in the first couple of years with the limited scholarships, the fact that their patience ran out with him in a tough situation that they knew was coming that they didn't tell him about, yeah, it's a huge sliding door. So yes, it's the two big what ifs, and they're both tied together.
Yeah. And now here we are in 2025. It's a different version of Lane, a 50-year-old Lane. And at the same time, what happens early in this week ahead of a big time matchup? His
Yeah,
daughter is in all over the news with the hard launch of the relationship with Whit Weeks, the star LSU linebacker. And it's just like Lane's tweeting out, take the over on this. And it's so peak Lane. And you know, it just all of this makes me think whenever I try and figure out who this guy is, what his next move is going to be, all these different things, I just come back to I'm glad he's in our sport.
yeah,
And I
oh
don't,
yeah.
like I don't have a vested interest. I'm just glad he's in our sport.
I say that all the time about certain programs. You can really dislike Alabama, and you can really dislike USC, and you can really dislike Texas, but man, Miami. But the sport is more interesting when they're relevant, right? It's just you want them around. You gotta have a Darth Vader, right? Yeah, there's someone you don't like, and then if you like them, it's this next gen Steve Spurrier, right? Back in the day, it was Steve Spurrier. If he was your coach, you loved him. If you were with the other 130 schools, you hated him. And in Lane Kiffin's case, it's very similar. And he knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't ride Twitter like a mechanical bull like he used to on an hourly basis. But when he picks his spots, as he has done this very week, then he's still pretty good at it.
You were at Oklahoma last week with SEC Nation for the first time. What did you take away from your time in Norman?
My favorite thing about Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC has been, I've been to Oklahoma a million times. I was on Baker Mayfield duty, when Baker was there his last 2 years. We did an E60 about Baker. And so I was up there all the time. And it's such a great place. And to walk down the Heisman Trail, and there's 7 Heisman Trophy winners. these statues, and then right next to that, there's the statues of the coaches of Stoops and Switzer and Bud Wilkinson. It's a super, super smart crowd. The Boomer Schooner and all that. My favorite thing are all these old school SEC fans who've never been to Oklahoma and don't know anything about it, them going to experience that. Same at Texas. We were at Texas last year for the first time, and Kentucky was there. And the Kentucky fans were having a better time than anyone else because they were like, Austin's amazing. And all these Auburn fans on Friday that were taking the campus tour and we're going to the bookstore and we're getting stadium tours. And it's just so cool to me to kind of educate these kind of insular SEC fans. When I was a student at Tennessee, I didn't understand. I grew up in North Carolina, right? So I go to Tennessee, and I remember we played UCLA like in the Rose Bowl, like week 1 or 2 my freshman year, and all the old school Tennessee people were like, whatever, man, that'd be fine. I'm like, they're really good. They got a quarterback who could be an All-American, but that's when I realized SEC fans, they live in the SEC bubble and they don't think anyone else is probably worthy of that. And so they don't know much about Oklahoma and they don't know much about Texas. And so to get to see them experience it, and then the flip side of that, which is Oklahoma fans and Texas fans getting to go to Neyland and getting to go to Georgia and getting to go to these places, that's the fun part for me is watching people go, man, this is awesome.
True or false? You were filling in for Feinbaum on Friday at the start of the show because Paul was interviewing to become the next AD at Oklahoma.
Yeah. I I kept asking Paul, so I was really tired. I'd taken the red eye back from Oregon on Thursday night. I'm too old to be doing that. And I'm thinking, you know what? I don't have any TV on Friday when I get to Norman. I'm just gonna have our meeting and go to bed. And as soon as I land, they're like, you got to host Feinbaum because he's not here. And so he was. And then when I tried to ask him, where were you? He was very dicey about it. So yeah, I asked him if maybe he was interviewing for the chancellor's job is open at Syracuse now. Like, were you up there? But I don't. There's no telling where Paul is. He's that's why he's the most interesting man in college football, not named Lane Kiffin.
He couldn't have been further away than you were the day prior. I
No,
mean, there's just no
he
way.
was somewhere in Texas. I do know that. But I don't know why he was there. I don't know if his plane was diverted. I don't know if he was like, interviewing someone. If he was, I have no idea. Having lunch with
Could be.
Steve Sarkisian, I have no clue. But all I know is on 0 hours of sleep, I had to interview Brent Venables and Patty Gasso and Greg McElroy, and I don't even really remember any of it.
It was good. I saw
Thank
one
you.
of the clips that came out with Venables and
He's
talking about like
great.
how he doesn't want to joke. He fits in very, very well.
Yeah.
I don't know that there are a lot of people that are wired quite like he is though. And
No.
that's what's unique about him.
And he literally, if you were making a movie and you were casting just I need a football coach to stand on the sideline, Venables is the guy. So he showed up for the interview with a whistle around his neck.
Yeah, he was in
I,
his usual like
oh,
his same outfit that he wears on Saturdays. I think
I
he was
was like,
wearing for the
dude,
interview.
yeah, I was like, you have a whistle around your neck. He's like, we're doing walkthroughs right over here as soon as I'm done talking to you, which is why the interview was not 20 minutes. It was about 10 minutes. But I love that dude. I loved him when he was an assistant coach, when he was at Oklahoma forever and obviously down at Clemson. And he looks like he could play like right now. He looks
Yeah.
like he could play. He has said, he has these coaching nuggets of wisdom. Like, what was it? He said something to Marty and myself, Marty McGee at SEC Media Days. He's like, when you're born, you look like your mom and dad. When you die, you look like your decisions. Come on.
What?
He said that. He said that literally, and Marty and I just went, "Whoa!" And
Oh my God.
Marty is a motivational like saying guy. So in the middle of the interview, I see Marty over there writing it down. But I was like, I mean, that's like some philosophical stuff. But I love Venables. But again, he looks like he could put on pads and play right now. Those are my like Kyle Whittingham at Utah.
Yeah.
Coach Witt could play right now. I'm convinced he would get a sack if he played right now.
Speaking of Clemson, is Clemson going to be in the bottom 10? Which, by the way, that'll be out Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah.
If so, are you prepared to deal with the wrath of one Dabo Sweeney for criticizing a 1-3 team?
So um, as we record this at 11 a.m. Eastern, I filed the story literally right before I logged on with you. So
Hmm.
yeah, I can tell you, yes, they make an appearance. And I can tell you that I quote Crash Davis from Bull Durham, which was you have fungus on your shower shoes. You know, if you win 20 games in the big leagues, you can have fungus on your shower shoes, and the press will say you're colorful. If you're losing and you have fungus on your shower shoes, you're just a slob. That's kind of how I feel about Dabo. Like the preaching works, when you win in 10 games. When it's not, you need to just, start working on next year and don't yell at us.
Is Florida going to be bottom 10 for the rest of the season? Because it kind of feels like it.
Man, it's tough. It's getting crowded because you got your regulars, right? You State of Kent, and you got Acrimonious and Sam Houston is terrible.
Oh, yeah.
UMass is always UMass we call them. But this year the Power Four is trying their best to crash the party. I mean, I don't believe that Arkansas is a bad football team, but Arkansas right now is like watching those dash cam TikToks. Like it starts and there's a truck in front of you and you don't know how it's going to hit a light pole, but it's definitely going to hit a light pole. That's how I feel about Arkansas right now. And so do you take Arkansas? You take Arkansas State. Like there's a lot to choose from. But yeah, between Florida and Clemson and last year it was Florida State. Last year Florida State was legit in the bottom 10 like by the end of September and they just stayed there. The coveted fifth spot is for a team that's probably good but had a bad weekend. Florida State graduated from that last year, and this year, Florida and Arkansas and some of the Clemson, some of these other ones, they're bypassing coveted fifth spot status.
You probably just need a spot for one of the big three Florida schools that somebody's just going to
Just
occupy that
rotate.
spot.
Yeah,
It
just
just
rotate. Every
rotates.
year somebody's gonna be in there. Yeah, Miami. I got bad news next year. You're probably if the circle of life.
Yeah. Last one for you. We'll tie it all back to Lane since his name will inevitably be linked to the Florida job. You talked about Strickland earlier and having that dinner with boosters last year. If there is a hire to be made, as many have speculated, and you are Scott Strickland, I'm putting you in those shoes. Who's the guy that you're going all in to get?
Well, I don't know the answer, but I know who they need to be. They need to have a dynamic personality. And, I wrote this column when Billy got the job. I guess it was year two. And I wrote about, you're asking a fan base for patience because I believe in Billy Napier. I think he's building something. I think they have talent. I don't know that this is the right fit. But what I kept hearing from those boosters was he's boring. Like that had as much to do with their problem with him as the losses because they're spoiled rotten, right? I mean, Spurrier, even Zook and Muschamp, when they were losing, they were flipping out, right? I mean, there was and that's just not who Billy is. It's not who Billy was as a quarterback at Furman. It's not who he was when he coached Louisiana. It's just not who he is. And so, whoever they get, they need to be a dynamic personality because the Florida fans don't just want to win; they want to be entertained while they win. Urban Meyer, I would not describe as dynamic, but Urban Meyer definitely loves to give us all lectures on how to be better humans and people and all that stuff. So they need something along those lines. And so there needs to be a little something extra. So whoever it is, they need to bring a personality with them because that's what the people in Gainesville want. Even if they're losing, they would like to be entertained. And Billy is a lot of things, and I love that. But entertaining is not on the list.
Ryan, you're the best. Everyone should go watch The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin on ESPN Wednesday night. It'll be available on the new ESPN app as well. Thanks for doing this, man.
You're the man.